As you see, folks, we're trying to just do a poll, see who's out there, and if these just answer this first poll so we get an understanding who's out there and what we should talk about tonight. If you don't mind, we'll take another minute and then we'll probably get started as people are joining in. So try to complete this poll, please. And there'll be another one coming in a few minutes after this one. Thank you. Dave, are you ready to start on your end?
Yes, I am.
All right. I think we're going to share these polls. So everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm Rosario Greco. Dave Nader is also be your host tonight. We're going to talk about this CARES Act. But before we were going to get going, we wanted to share a question, which is, have you been affected by the virus? How you've been affected from furlough to laid off to working from home and not affected? Surprisingly, 51% of you out there have not been affected by this when it comes to work. 30% are working from home, 8% have been laid off, and 11% have been furloughed. So a little surprising what we're hearing with the unemployment numbers. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, from the small sample we have here with the people on, it's great news that most are still working and really feel that they're unaffected. So that's very good to hear.
Right. So thank you for participating with that. We're going to start going. James, if you want to take that off, that's good. If you want to start that second poll, that's great also. You might ask, what should you be doing from home if you are home at this point? Well, you know, our answers as financial planners are get your financial life in order, revisit your cash flows, what income's coming in, what expenses are going out, do we have a surplus, a shortage, maybe you have to refinance some loans as interest rates have come down. In the risk management end, if you, God forbid something happened to you, if you were disabled, if you died, if you got into auto accident, do we have umbrella coverage? Investments, look at your asset allocation, your diversification. Have you created hedges for times like this? Tax-wise, review your 1040. Is this a time to look at Roth planning and other things that we may be able to do with taxes? And lastly, legal. Review and update your will, your executor, your beneficiaries, your trusts, if there are trusts, power of attorneys, healthcare directive. These are things at this point, if you're at home and you have time, it seems like a lot of people working from home, that you can visit this stuff, which we call these disciplines of financial planning. At Greco Nader, we take all these disciplines, we put them together, and we come out with a financial plan. And we try to coordinate everything going into one good direction for you. For clients who are on this call, and there are clients on this call, thank you for being loyal to us for many, many years and through these dark times. We've seen them before, and I assume we'll see them again. You'll be receiving emails from us. We've been calling you guys directly over the last month and a half. This is our second webinar, our third in the last 2 months, but our second in the last 3 weeks. We're continuing to do annual reviews. Maria will call you, set them up. We'll try to do a Zoom call. If you feel this is not the appropriate time because everything else going on, you want to push it back, no big deal. But we're here. At the end of this discussion tonight, you can click on the chat and you'll have our calendar and where you can book an appointment with us if you want to talk to us on what we presented or talked about tonight. For others on this call, and there's a lot of other people on this call, if interested in Greco-Nader, again, or if you have questions that we did not get to by the end of this, click on the link, create a 15 to 30-minute discovery call with us, and you'll get to find out who we are so we can introduce ourselves formally. We'll find out who you are and hopefully answer the questions that you have. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Dave to start going on this. We assume about 30 minutes of discussion, 10 minutes of answers and questions type of deal, and we'll go from there. So go ahead, Dave.
Great, thanks, Rosario. So as Rosario said, we're Greco-Nader Wealth Management. Really quickly, we're a family-owned boutique wealth management firm. Between Rosario and I know we're very young, very handsome-looking guys, but between us, we have over 60 years.
Speak for yourself, Dave.
I'm trying. But between he and I, we both have over 30 years experience. So between us, over 60 years experience in helping guide families into and through retirement. And I met with a client a few weeks ago. They've been a client for 28 years. And so, when someone comes to us, our expectation is that they'll be a client for the long term. And to Rosario's point, we've gone through dark times like this before. We've gone through other significant market downturns. I will grant you that this feels a little bit different because of the climate and because of the human cost of what's going on. Okay. Here's our contact information, as Rosario indicated in the chat. This will also be replicated. If you want to reach out to us, if you're a client, have questions, please never hesitate to contact us. If you're someone who's not yet a client and want to have a chat with us, set up a discovery call. Our contact information is in the chat, and you'll be able to do that. We have provided here a number of links. We're not going to go through all these in detail, but these are some resources that you can use. We'll be sending out this presentation via email tomorrow that you can use to help your own situation, whether it be for auto loans, personal credit card, what have you. You can see a number of them here. On the next page, we have things regarding grocery delivery and stuff, food delivery services. A lot of us are shut in, and so these may be some links to kind of make your life a bit easier. In terms of what we're going to cover, these are the topics we're going to cover tonight. We are not subject matter experts because right now no one is, but this is a very dynamic and it's a very fluid situation. The key thing that you have to understand is that the federal government is trying to do as much as they can to help individuals through this situation, okay? And so we'll try and get you at least an understanding of some of the programs that are out there, how they can fit to your situation. As I say, you'll not be an expert in this by the time this call's over, but at least we can, with these links and the information that we're going to give you, point you in the right direction. Now, they're discussing this or describing this as a global pandemic. It's not as if it's the first one we've ever seen. You had SARS, the avian flu, swine flu, MRSA, Ebola, Zika, and now the coronavirus. But yet, if you look at world markets, we've been through these situations before. And so we'll get through this one. As I say, any bear market or any significant market downturn always seems like, wow, it's the end of the world. I will grant you that with the human cost that we're seeing in this country and around the world, it does feel a bit darker. It feels a bit more like, wow, this is really, really bad. And it is. I mean, not to downplay that. But we will get through this. The federal government, the governments of other nations are all working in concert to try and get us through this. And we feel very strongly that we will. And we feel pretty strongly we'll get through it sooner rather than later. If you look at the next slide, the webinar that Rosario referenced, we had done about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, where we really unpacked the type of planning that we do for our clients. And this was a chart we spent a lot of time on. I just want to run you through some numbers really quickly. If you were not on that presentation and want to get it from us, request it through the chat and we'll get that to you. But long story short, back on February 19th, so we were on February 19th, the market peaked, okay, at 3,386 as measured by the S&P. On March 20th, it closed down at 2,300. It was a downturn of 31.9%. Okay, seems pretty bad. In perspective, though, to the bull market that we had, you went up 400%, you're down a third, okay? So you're still up significantly, right? You're still up about 280% off that. Now, from March 20th until now, you're up 21%. Okay, in the past 14 trading days, the market's up 21%. So as opposed to being down 32 from where we were at the peak, we're now down 17. I'm not saying that feels good, but I'm saying from perspective, things are improving, and they tend to, when the markets do move to the upside, they tend to move, certainly when we see situations like this, they can move pretty quickly. So it's not as bad as it seems. We're seeing some recovery, and we think we'll be in good shape sooner rather than later. Now, let's start to talk about what's the government doing for you. So the first thing we're going to discuss is the recovery rebate. The federal government estimates that 90% of taxpayers will receive these payments. It's paid as a credit if you don't get a direct check. Now, this rebate's based upon your latest filed tax return, either 2018 or 2019. We'll discuss that more. If you file as an individual and you're eligible, you will receive $1,200. If you file jointly, you'll receive $2,400, and there's an additional $500 credit for each child. As we understand it, they're defining a child as under the age of 17. A lot of you probably remember Dire Straits.
That's the way you do it. You play the guitar on the MTV. That ain't working. That's the way you do it. Money for nothing and your chicks for free.
Sorry, it's very dry material. We're trying to make it a little exciting and interesting. So there's a chart we have prepared for you to make it a little bit easier to understand who's getting these checks. And because not everyone will get them, there's some income phase out. So as you see, where it talks about individuals, you'll receive $1,200. Now, if you are up to $75,000 in adjusted gross income, you'll get the full $1,200. Between $75,000 and $99,000, there will start to be a phase out. The closer you get to $99,000, the less that you would receive. If you're over $99,000, unfortunately, you would not be receiving anything under the recovery rebate. If you're a couple filing jointly, the payment's $2,400. And up to the threshold of $150,000, you will get that full $2,400. If your AGI is between 150 and 198, it will start to phase out again. The closer you get to the 198, the smaller amount you would get. If you're over that 198,000, again, unfortunately, in terms of this part of the stimulus package, you would not receive anything. Now, the tax credit you're receiving up front, it's based upon your 2019 tax return if you filed it. Not everybody has. We're close to tax filing, but a lot of things have slowed down in the past month or so. So if you have not filed 2019, it would be based on your 2018 return. If your 2019 income is lower than 2018, you may want to get that filing in. It'll be paid as soon as possible. Now, the last data we saw said potentially not until May, but we've seen some additional information today, and I'll share that with you in a sec. For those of you on the call that are receiving Social Security, if you qualify income-wise, this will be deposited to where you're currently receiving your Social Security checks. Most Social Security recipients do get a direct deposit. If you're in that same situation, this money will be deposited directly into your account. You don't have to do anything. There's no filing. It's just going to show up in your account. So that's going to make it pretty simple. Okay. We saw today that the IRS is targeting early next week. So you can start looking for it next week. If it doesn't show up, don't call me and yell at me, but this is what we're seeing from the federal government. Otherwise, they'll do a direct deposit. If you had gotten your 2018 or 2019 tax refund direct deposit into a bank account, they will deposit this rebate into that account. Okay. About 50% of filers will get their check direct deposit, whether they're a Social Security recipient or they have a direct deposit on their tax return. Otherwise, they'll send it to your last known physical address. That would be paper checks. Now, if you've moved, would encourage you, if you've moved recently, would encourage you to go on the IRS website. It's Form 8822 and process a change of address form so they can get it to your now current address. Okay. If you don't receive it in the form of a check now, or if you don't qualify based on this tax return, but you will in 2020, it will be applied as a credit to your 2020 return. So I have a little chart here for you to kind of walk you through what I've just discussed. I think it'll make it a little bit easier.
Hey, Dave.
Yes.
It's my understanding, reading some things today, that the IRS is going to try to send a physical letter to you telling you exactly when the check's coming. It's supposed to go out 2 weeks prior to you actually getting that check, and they'll tell you if it's coming through your bank or a direct check. The IRS, really, you're not going to get through them to the phone. The IRS will never call you. The IRS will never email you. So, and they don't go on, you're not going to go into, anywhere and find the IRS other than letters. So try not to get scammed, because there's a lot of people already saying, get this, get that, just give me your Social Security and what have you. Again, the IRS will not do this over an email or really a phone call. It's going to be in the letter version. They're going to try to send a letter to the people they're sending these checks to, how you're getting them and when you're getting them.
Thanks, Rosario. So in this chart, you see on the left margin, it's referencing your 2018 and 2019 income. So if we look in the upper left, if your income is lower than the threshold and your 2020 income is also lower than the threshold amounts that we just referenced, you'll get the recovery rebate now and you'll keep it. Great. If your income is lower than the threshold in 2018 or 2019 and your 2020 income is higher than the threshold, you'll get it now and you'll get to keep it even if you have a good year in 2020. Okay, so great news. We run into a caution area here. You see this yellow shaded box. If your 2018 and 2019 income is higher than the threshold amounts we just referenced, but 2020 is lower, unfortunately, you won't get it now. However, it will be applied to your 2020 return. Okay, and you'll get it, it'll funnel through, it'll flow through on your tax return. Okay. Now, unfortunately, if your 2018 and 2019 income is higher than the thresholds we just referenced, as is your 2020 income, that's that red box. Unfortunately, you won't get it now and you won't get it later. Hopefully though, if your income is that high and it remains that high, like a lot of people on this call, it seems you will not have been too adversely affected, if at all, by what's going on economically right now. Now, that's the recovery rebate. Let's jump into the unemployment coverages. There are two levels of unemployment coverage here. One is going to be state unemployment, and the other is going to be the federal unemployment. Okay, state unemployment, based upon what your income is, the weekly benefit in New Jersey, and these are state-specific programs, but the benefit in New Jersey, the max is $713, runs for 6 months. You qualify if you lost your job due to employer's lack of work or company downsizing. And you can see on the eligibility, at least $200 per week for at least 20 weeks, or, and I'm sorry, there's a chat box there, or at least $10,000 in total covered employment during the base year. And then we have the spot for you where you can apply. Now, you were a W-2 employee at AT&T, you can qualify for state unemployment. If you were a 1099 employee, typically you will not qualify for state coverage. Now, there is what's called the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, okay? Now, to get the federal coverage, you must first apply to the state. So even though if you're a 1099 employee and you probably wouldn't qualify for state, one of the prerequisites for getting federal coverage under the federal unemployment is you have to apply to the state and be declined, okay? And so this is unemployment comp for those who don't normally qualify. The government will cover the first week. It increases the benefit to $600 per week for up to 4 months. Now, there are some of you on this call, because the federal program, it's really the federal government giving money to the states, but the states are going to administer it. It will come through your state unemployment system. So you're not going to go to a different website to get to the feds, okay? The states are going to administer this. As of, and I'm just reading from something from the Department of Labor, up to this point, all states have executed agreements with the departments as of March 28th. The CARES Act specifies that these federal benefits payments will end after payments for the last week of benefits before July 31st. So it ends out at that time frame. But they will give you, if you're collecting state and you also qualify for the Fed, that federal monies will come along with your state monies. Okay, so it increases it to where you could potentially be getting about $1,300 per week if you're getting both the state and federal coverage. Okay, if you don't qualify for state, you can still qualify for the federal coverage. Again, apply for the state first, and then that's the prerequisite to getting the federal coverage. Okay, so on the federal side, who's eligible? If you're impacted by the COVID-19, and frankly, who isn't, and you are not otherwise covered by state unemployment comp, or if you've already exhausted your state unemployment. This could be a gig economy worker, for example, if you're an Uber driver or you drive for Lyft. If you're an independent contractor, and these varying other categories of employment where typically you don't qualify for state coverage, you can get the federal benefits. If you're someone who, as I say, was a W-2 employee, you would get the state and you could also get the federal, okay? And really simply what they're trying to do is they're trying to get money into the hands of the citizens, of people who are affected by this. We've probably all got additional costs with what's going on, and so they're trying to make things as easy as possible. Don't be shy about reaching out for these benefits. They're there for your use and benefit. So, don't be shy about, oh, I don't need it, I'll leave it for somebody else. They're being put here for you, okay?
All right, thanks, Dave. I'm going to jump on now, relief for retirement accounts, which most people that have IRAs, 401ks are going to be affected by. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about the extension of certain things, one being your tax return. So your tax return, which is due by April 15th every year, is now being pushed back to July 15th. What also happens with this is any IRA or Roth contributions you would have made for 2019 is now also pushed back to July 15th. Now be careful here. If you make a contribution into your IRA on May 1st and you do not tell the custodian what's the contribution for, what year, they're going to probably label it as a 2020 contribution, not a 2019. So be very careful if you're making IRA or Roth contributions that you put the right year down, because you could possibly now be making a contribution after the April 15th date. If you have an HSA, the health savings account, or medical savings account, or a Coverdale educational savings, you are now also extended to July 15th for any 2019 contribution. Last thing I want you to be aware of with this is that the estimated payment, which is due April 15th, 2020, for the 2020 year, is now being pushed off to July 15th. There'll be no penalties, there'll be no interest accrued. You basically should have paid it by the 15th of April. They're going to allow you to do it as July 15th. But the second quarter, which is always due on June 15th, that is still due on June 15th. So we have a situation here in where your second quarter estimated payment due on June 15th has to be made, but your first quarter doesn't have to be made until July 15th. I'm not sure what the IRS is going to do here, what the government is. I got a feeling if this continues that they're going to push that June 15th payment out a bit. But right now, that's the way the rules are. So if you're doing estimated payments, don't think that your first payment at this point is July 15th, because it's not. Your second payment is due by June 15th. If we look at the coronavirus related distributions, let's call this CRDs, the government basically came in and said, well, if you need money, we're going to allow you to go into your IRAs, employer-sponsored retirement plans, or a combination of those two, and take out $100,000. If you take this $100,000 out and you're underneath 59.5, there's no 10% penalty. You're not subject to mandatory withholding, meaning you're not going to withhold dollars for taxes because you don't owe any taxes. You can take these dollars that you take out, let's say it's $100,000, and effectively put it back into the account over the next 3 years. In which case you would have taken out $100,000 out of your IRA or 401k or whatever plan you're in, used it for whatever you needed it for, paid it back in, and there was no foul, no penalties, no taxes. If you decided not to pay it back in, then you would have to pay the tax supposedly now over 3 years. When you read, and I've gone to the IRS website, there's nothing that describes what to do here. They're just saying you have, or you can spread it over 3 years. Now, let's say I'm in 2020 and I take 100,000 out, which I'm allowed to do, no penalty, no tax. And then I look at my 2020 earnings and maybe I had to go on unemployment. I maybe got cut down 25% of what I was making. So maybe I want to take some of that money that I took out of the IRA and not pay it back because I might be in the lower tax bracket. No penalty. I would effectively be paying a lower tax on that money than if I put it back into my 401k or IRA, maybe paid a higher tax when I retired. So that's something you got to look and talk to with your financial advisors or your tax preparers to figure out if it's best for you to pay it back or not. And you don't have to pay it all back. You can pay some of it back, okay? Now, how do you sort of manipulate this? I don't want to use that word because it's like you're taking advantage or something, but it's out there, right? So first off, is it 100,000 for family or 100,000 for anybody who has an IRA that is over 100,000? The way I read this is anyone who has an IRA over 100,000, you could take 100,000 out of it. So if you and your spouse have a 300,000 IRA each, I think you both can go in and take this $100,000. So you can both take money out of your IRA. I've looked again at the IRS website, no mention of this whatsoever. I've done unbelievable amount of research, cannot find the answer to this question. But it seems to me, unless the IRS clarifies this in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 months, that you can go take 100,000 each and use it to your advantage. Now, if I had a HELOC, and I'm making this up, how to give you an example. I have a HELOC of $100,000 and it's costing me 4%. And I have 100,000 in my 401k, and let's call it in a stable value fund, a fund that's paying less than 1%, but there's no risk to it. So at this point, I think I can go take the 100,000 out of my 401k, no tax, no penalty, take that 100,000, pay my HELOC down, save 4%, but I lose 1% from my investment in the 401k. Net effect is a 3% savings on 100,000, it's $3,000 times 3 years. You saved yourself $9,000. Simple math. However, let's say you have 100,000 in investments, not in a stable fund, and that 100,000 4 weeks ago, was 120,000. It's come down 20%. And you now take the dollars out and you pay off your HELOC. Well, now you might have a problem. And the problem is, yes, you'll save 9,000 by paying off that HELOC. But at the end of the day, if the 100,000 comes back in the next year or two to 120, you get your money back because the market comes back. You would have saved 9,000 in interest on the HELOC, but you would have lost 20,000 in gain on your investments. So I think the only way it works in that particular example is if you look at your IRAs or 401ks and you were lucky enough, or maybe dumb enough, I don't know, whatever the answer is there. But if you have money in your cash account, it might make sense to take it out and pay down credit card debt that might be at 15, 16, 17%, or pay down a HELOC, because it'd just be effectively a better way of using dollars. But that's just an example of how you can see this working out. So who can qualify? Who can get this 100,000 out of their IRAs? Well, you had to be diagnosed with the virus, either you, your spouse, or dependent. You were unable to go to work because you had to take care of your kids. You couldn't go to work because your place of employment is not open. You experience adverse financial consequences as a result of quarantine or layoffs or just hours being reduced. And there's some other provisions that the IRS is working to allow more people to qualify to get those dollars if they needed to. So if you can hit any of these things, you can now go take the $100,000 out of your IRA or plans and either pay it back or never pay it back and then put it into tax. But you avoid that 10% penalty if you're under 59.5. Another key to this CARES Act when it comes to retirement is the loans that you could take out of 401ks. So first off, people have to understand this loan has to be made by March 27th of this year to September 23rd. That's 6 months. So if you're right now going to go in October and take a loan out of your 401k, you're not going to be able to do that. So the old rules were you could get 50% of your value up to $50,000. The new rule moves that 50,000 up to 100,000. So you can use the lesser of 100% of your vested balance or $100,000. That's what you can take out of your 401k. If you do this, you're going to delay the payments back into your 401k for 1 year. So you don't have to pay it back for 1 year. Now, another thing here is if you already have a loan in your 401k, you do not have to make payments for 1 year. I think that starts in March. So literally, you don't have to pay back into your 401k until next year if you already had a loan. Now, with that being said, why would anybody loan money out of a 401k? Obviously, we can go right in and take $100,000 and not have to fill out any paperwork. For speed, convenience, we would have the $100,000, meaning I don't have to go to bank to apply for it, right? When I take out the dollars, I can then, pay interest to myself. So every company is a little bit different, but I'm paying really myself. So the interest goes back to me. I have 5 years to pay back this loan, usually done on a quarterly basis. I can prepay it back if I wanted to, but I don't have to. I can wait out the 5 years and do it that way. So this is why people go out and get these type of loans. Why not take the loan? Well, if you really don't need the money, there's no advantage here, right? If it's in your 401k and it is invested, which I assume would be in your 401k, then by taking it out, what would you do with it? Well, I might need it for cash. I might need it for emergencies. I might need it to pay my mortgage, things like that. But if the need is really not there, you probably shouldn't do it. And the reason being is it's in your 401k, it's growing tax deferred, and it's invested. Right now, it's probably 20% lower than it was a month and a half ago. Why would you take money out 20% lower to do something with if you didn't have to? So it really should be looked as an emergency situation. And now what comes to light in my mind is if I could take out $100,000 out of an IRA, and if my spouse can do the same, that's $200,000. And if she has a 401k, she could take out $100,000, and I can take out $100,000 on my 401k. Boy, that's like $400,000 I can go get. Now, should I or shouldn't I? That's what you got to talk to your financial advisor or your tax person to figure out what's the best way how to do this. But it's an interesting type of topic. We'll get more clarification as the weeks and months go by. If how much can we really use out of these type of qualified plans. Now understand, there is no loans out of IRAs. IRAs do not allow loans. So you can't go to your IRA, wherever it may be, and say, can I take out $100,000? That you cannot do. Another thing that was done with this act was when it comes to retirement accounts is waiving the RMD. So for most folks, if you are over 70 and a half prior 2020, you've been taking out amount of dollars out of your IRA because you're forced to take that out because the IRS says you need to take those out. That, by the way, applies to IRAs, 457 plans, 403B plans. Also, in 2019, if you turned 70 and a half, you could have taken a one-time hit in where you said, I don't want to take it in 2019. I'm going to push it to 2020, which effectively you would have to take the 2019 RMD by April 1st and then take the 2020 RMD by December 31st. This new act says you do not have to take an RMD period in 2020. So for people that really don't need the money and have money elsewhere, why would you take something out of an IRA to pay taxes on? If you're in a stretch IRA, meaning you could be in a deceased IRA, my dad dies, he leaves me money, it's an IRA, I don't put it all into taxes right away, I can put it over my lifetime, which now has been changed, by the way, to 10 years with the Secure Act, which was voted in December of 2020. But in this situation, we do not have to take anything out of the RMD for a stretch IRA. So again, it gets pushed off to 2021. If you were getting paid through a 5-year rule of IRAs, and I'm not going to go into how that happens, but if you were, again, you don't have to take it this year, which now becomes a 6-year rule, not a 5-year rule. If you were getting dollars because someone passed away in 2020, you can now wait to 2021. The Secure Act, which was enacted in December of last year, does not force you to take any money out this year. It starts next year. So ultimately, we do not have to take money out of these IRAs, which makes sense as these values have come down dramatically, and you probably have to sell at a lower amount to take out cash, which might hurt a lot of people. So what happens if you took your RMD? I mean, this law came into effect March 27th. From January 1st to March 27th, a lot of people take their RMDs early in the year for cash flow purposes. Well, if it's done within 60 days and you haven't taken another 60-day rollover, you can literally pay it right back. No problem, no harm, no foul. So put it right back into the account. But Rosario, I withheld taxes. That's okay. Those taxes you'll get back in your 2020 tax return because you overpaid because you didn't keep the RMD. So that's one way of doing it. But what happens if I took it out January 2nd and now we're in April? 60 days have passed. You can now turn around and say to the IRS, I didn't mean to take an RMD. What I meant to take was a coronavirus-related distribution. Well, that allows you to pay it back within 3 years. Again, effectively putting it back or even holding the money that you have for the next 3 years and putting it back in 2023. No penalty, no taxes. So you can look at it that way. For people that are giving dollars to charities, so most people don't understand that you can go into your IRA distribution and you can give money directly to charities and no one pays taxes on it, which is a good thing. You're helping charities and you're not paying taxes on that distribution. And a bunch of my clients do this. This law does not impact that at all. And lastly, what happens if I was a non-spouse beneficiary? Again, dad died, left me an IRA. I put it into a deceased IRA. January 2nd, I took out my RMD, and now we're on April 2nd. What can I do? Nothing. You're stuck with it. You can't roll back. You can't say coronavirus-related distribution. You just got to take it on. Charitable contributions. So ultimately, I'll make this one pretty quick. The IRS and the government basically said, we want to keep people giving money to charities, especially what's going on in the world. So what they've come up with is you could take a $300 deduction that you made to a check to your favorite charity. It will be before you calculate the AIG, so it's before the line, what accountants would say, which means you get that $300 deduction. $300 will save you some money, but it's not a big to-do, so nothing I'm going to go crazy about. But those are for people that do not itemize, right? You take the standard deduction, which last year 90% of tax returns use the standard deduction, not the itemized deduction. Well, if you use a standard deduction, you get that, whatever that may be, $26,000. Before the line, you can deduct the $300. Very small impact. However, the IRS came back and said, we still want you to give. So what they said is for an individual, the old laws were, you can only deduct charitable contributions up to 60% of AGI. So if my AGI was $100,000, I can deduct $60,000. That was it. Well, with this new law, you can now go up to $100,000. And quite frankly, if you even went beyond that, to allow you to carry over the beyond for the next 5 years so you don't lose it. Now for corporations, the charitable deductions from AGI goes from 10% to 25%. For inventory, not cash, it goes from 15% to 25%. So what the government's trying to do here is give you a little more tax incentive to keep doing your contributions and helping people out. Medical provisions, and this is pretty interesting because they've made a dramatic amount of changes here. So ultimately, if you're in an HSA, MSA, or FSA, these are the put dollars away somewhere where I can pay after deductible with these dollars. I can sort of pre-fund before tax what my medical expenses are going to be. They've now included over-the-counter medicines, which is in section 3702. So things that were not prescribed by your doctor that you can get over the counter, you can still now use your HSA, FSA, or MSA to pay for those. For Medicare beneficiaries, when we get a vaccine, and sooner or later we will, it might be 9 months, 8 months, 12 months, a year and a half, I don't know. When we do, there'll be no cost to the vaccine if you're a Medicare beneficiary, and that's on section 37, I think, 13. Medicare Part D, when we actually have medication, which could be 30 days, 60 days, 90 days away, depending who you believe at this point. They'll allow you again to take a 90-day supply of that medication. Supposedly through Medicare, it would not cost any dollars, no deductibles or anything like that. Last couple of things is telehealth. So I'm not sure why Medicare and even insurance companies do not allow telehealth. I mean, they allow you to call your doctor. Your doctor could give you some advice. Your doctor charges you. It's out of your own pocket. Now there's services in where you can call certain agencies, doctors, and if you're on Medicare, Medicaid will pick up that cost. And I'm telling you right now, a bunch of the insurance companies are going to allow you to do that too. Just not sure which ones yet. But, you know, you're not going to go to a doctor's office, any of these places where you might want to get advice, and you would have to pay for that advice going there and possibly get sick with the virus. So it makes sense to be able to get on a phone, get into like a Zoom call like we're doing tonight, talk to your doctor. I know my doctor is now doing Zoom calls. So, you know, I could talk to him, he could talk to me, and he can charge the insurance company on this discussion because it is medical advice. So I think that's pretty neat. Student loans. So the federal student loan payments are now deferred. So if you graduated from college 4 or 5 years ago, like I did, and I had X amount of dollars at that time, it seemed like I had $1 million in loans because it took me 10 years to pay it back. And it was only 10,000, Dave, if you can believe that. But it took me forever. And the kids today, they're walking out with 60,000 in loans, 120,000 in loans. I've seen some kids with a couple 100,000 in loans. It's a pretty significant hit. They're allowing you to push back those loans to September 30th and start in October. There's no interest charged. Nothing happens. You can keep paying if you want now to then, or you don't have to pay. Supposedly, no one's going to call you either and saying, where's the money kind of thing. Lastly, employers can now reimburse employees up to $5,250 for loan payments, and that will be excluded from their income. So if I work for a major corporation that allow me to do this, they would give me the $5,250 to pay the loans. I would not hit my income, and it would reduce my loan. That's a really good thing. They would not allow companies to do that before. In the past, companies could only help you or reimburse you for tuitions if it improved your job. So they've taken this definition one step further and allowing employers now to give you that $5,250. Now I'm thinking, well, how do I get this? So I've seen no process how to do this, but I probably call my employer and say, hey, can you guys do this for me? And if they start laughing on the other side, I turn around and say, okay, can you take it off my income and do this for me? Because it's nothing off their back. They're not paying more for it. They're paying me less, but it's a before tax dollar payment, which makes sense. I don't know how that's going to work out, but that's what's in the act at this point. That being said, I'm going to turn it back to Dave to go over the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, and this is for self-employed people and small business owners. Go ahead, Dave.
Thanks, Rosario. Just wanted to, I'd seen a couple things in the chat. I just wanted to address a couple things from the recovery rebate. The numbers that we quoted are based upon your adjusted gross income. So on your 1040, it's going to be line 8B, which is all of your income sources, and then you would go through Schedule 1 to go through your adjustments, okay? That's where you would find out what income they'd be using to see if you qualify for it. Another question was, are college-age students, are they eligible for the recovery rebate? The simple answer is that if you are claimed as a dependent upon someone else's return, no. If you're not claimed as a dependent upon someone else's return, then yes, you would qualify. And so those are a couple of quick questions. So I just wanted to answer them and address them quickly. So thanks, Rosario. So Paycheck Protection Program. This is being put in place for small businesses. And really what the government's trying to do is incentivize these small business owners to retain their employees, okay? It's fully guaranteed by the SBA, the Small Business Association. It's issued by an SBA lender. Typically, you would first start with your local banking relationship. If you're a small business owner, you've got a local bank probably that you run your payroll through, you've got varying accounts there, business checking, etc. That would be your first point to go to, your first point of contact, okay? Must be applied for by June 30. Now, they're saying that the maximum duration is 10 years. What we're seeing a lot of anecdotally is most likely it'll last for 2 years. You've got to be less than 500 employees. And as I say, you can apply through any SBA lender, okay? Now, these loans are for, go to the next slide, there, please, thanks. So maximum loan, it's either the lesser of 10 million or 2.5 times the average monthly payroll cost over the previous year. It excludes compensation that you're paying that is greater than 100,000. So you have an employee, you're paying them 150 grand, 100,000 of that would be eligible in the formula to determine what's the maximum loan that you can get. Now, the loans can be used for payroll costs, group health insurance premiums, other healthcare costs, salary, commission, rent, mortgage interest, utilities, and any other business interest incurred prior to January 15th, 2020. But they are really making it that they want it to be for payroll. But the main benefit here, okay, is that to our way of thinking, the single largest benefit is there's a possibility to have a portion, if not all of this loan forgiven, okay? Maximum interest rates, 4%. What we're seeing is that most banks are coming in around 1%, okay? You've got ability to borrow up to 10 million, no more than 4%, term of 10 years. It's a pretty significant win for most small business owners to get this kind of assistance during this period of time. I was at a small business yesterday, it's actually a healthcare provider. And we were chatting and he goes, yeah, he goes, I'm letting my staff go. I'm like, well, why aren't you going to go for the Paycheck Protection loans? He's like, I don't even know what that is. He goes, I figured they could collect unemployment. So we chatted about it. He's going to talk to his SBA lender. He's going to talk to his local banking relationship and see, because I've used this particular provider for near 20 years. And as I said to him, I go, you know, you've got great staff. I mean, you've got really, really good administrative people. God forbid they go on unemployment and they just don't come back. You've got to train someone new. So, you know, if you can retain them, you know, it might be of benefit to do so. He's going to investigate it. Okay. Payments of the loans are deferred for a period of time. So it's a qualification process. In order for the loan amount to be forgiven, okay, you've got to maintain the same average number of full-time employees. It doesn't have to be, if it's Bob and then it turns into Ed, that's okay. It doesn't have to be the same exact employee with the same average number of full-time employees. So from February 15 of 2020 through June 30, or January 1 of 2020 through February 15th of 2020. You've got to spend 75% of the loan on payroll cost, hence the name, Paycheck Protection Act. They want you to retain employees. There's certainly a medical, a physical element to what's going on with this coronavirus in terms of people might be getting ill. But there's also an element of, you know, if people are getting laid off, if they're getting furloughed, you know, there's a stress element to people maybe aren't getting sick, but there's a stress of having lost their job. There might be the depression of having lost their job. So the federal government's, you know, certainly aware of that, and they want to try and have as many employees be retained as possible. So they're hoping that their guidance is 75% of the money, you got to spend it on payroll. The other 25%, as we had just shown. To the extent that you don't meet that 75% threshold, some of the forgiveness could be reduced. Okay. Additional reductions in the amount to be forgiven if you've got employees who, if they're under 100,000 in compensation, if you cut their compensation as well, that could also reduce your forgiveness. All right. If you've got at the bottom of the page there, you can see lenders that would be participating in the program. Again, would encourage you, probably the first place you want to start with is your local banking relationship. Okay. I use a local bank I've been with that banker for probably 15 years. And so I called him up, he knows me, and we're working on the paperwork. The application's pretty simplistic. It's about 2 pages. So they're trying to make it as simple as they possibly can for you. Now, the second element that you could look at is what's considered an economic injury disaster loan, an EIDL, as they refer to them. Also administered by the SBA, up to $2 million, a very low interest rate of 3.75. The first payment's delayed for 1 year from the date of the origination of the loan. Now, even if you're turned down for the loan, there's a potential for $10,000 emergency cash grant. So, $10,000 can go a long way. It's not pocket change. It's a pretty significant amount of money. To apply for this loan, we've got the website for you below. Okay. So now, what are the differences? Well, the Paycheck Protection Loan is funded by lenders. The EIDL loans are by the SBA directly. With the Paycheck Protection, again, they want it to be mostly used for payroll, at least 75%. You can get up to 10 million. It's 2.5 times your monthly payroll. The rate's fixed at 1%. It's deferred for 6 months, and there's loan forgiveness. Okay, that's significant. If you can get 2.5 times payroll, let's say your payroll's 20 grand a month, and you can get 50,000 in a loan, and if you use it for payroll, it's forgiven. That's a massive benefit to a lot of small business owners. Okay, I mean, most people don't realize it. I think it's something like 90% of the people who are employed in this nation work for small businesses. It's not the Boeings of the world or the General Motors. It's small business owners. It's a local pizzeria. It's a firm like Rosario and I with our staff. So they want these employees to be retained, and that's what they're really trying to work towards. In terms of the EIDL, eligible use of funds, it can be payroll, it can be fixed debts. You might have a leasing program if you you do some manufacturing and you're leasing some of your equipment, things of that nature. It's up to $2 million. It's still a very favorable rate at 3.75%. You can get terms up to 30-year fixed, but there is no forgiveness on that loan. Okay, it is a loan. There's nothing that will be forgiven. Now, speaking of loans, most of us have a mortgage. Okay, I did call my mortgage servicer. I won't need to take use of this program, but if you have a mortgage, okay, and even with, let's say, state unemployment, maybe federal unemployment, you're still furloughed for a period of time. And for most people, their largest single monthly bill is their mortgage, okay? Call your mortgage company. Most mortgage companies are allowing you 3 months forbearance. You don't have to make the payment for the 3 months. Now, that's helpful. Keep in mind, at the end of those 3 months, the full amount of the payments is due. Let's say your mortgage is $2,000 a month. The full payment's due at $6,000. However, at the end of those 3 months, you can ask for another 3 months of forbearance, or they'll do a loan modification, which is simply, basically what will end up happening is, again, my example, $2,000 per month mortgage, you avoid that, you get a forbearance for 3 months, it's $6,000. They'll take that and they'll modify the loan such that you'll owe that money at the end of the loan. But again, you got to look at your primary bills and say, okay, I got to put food on the table, I've got other things I've got to cover. This may be something to look at. If we look at other kinds of loans, okay, car loans, credit card, right? If you've got a car loan, you've got a lease or a loan, contact the car company, okay? I have a Volkswagen, I have an Atlas. So I had already gotten correspondence from them stating that, hey, if you're impacted by the coronavirus, contact us. There are things we can do to help you out. So you've got a Ford truck, you've got a Chevy, you've got a BMW, whatever it is, contact the credit company, okay? If you're financing through the manufacturer, contact them and discuss with them what type of assistance can they provide to you. Same thing with credit card payments, okay? You have an outstanding balance of $1,000 on a Visa. Contact Visa. Hey, I've been furloughed, whatever, what's the case? What kind of assistance can you offer me? Okay, we've all been impacted on this. And so there are most providers, whether they be your mortgage company, car companies, credit card companies, they're willing to help. The big thing is communicate quickly and communicate often with them and let them know where you're at and ask them what can they do to offer assistance to you, okay? Now, we have covered a boatload of information. I know it's been pretty quick. We'll go through some question and answer right now. We will be sending out to everybody on the call this presentation tomorrow, okay? There's a lot of data in here. There's a lot of links that we've tried to provide to help you. Um, it seems like a pretty dark time, again, because it's not like typical economic downturns. There's a significant human cost of what we're seeing now. But there are a lot of people that are trying to help you. The federal government, the state with the unemployment, the federal with the paycheck protection loans, the EIDL loans, the recovery rebates. They're trying to assist and put monies into your hands to make this a little bit easier to get through, okay? Reach out and to these institutions and see how they can help you. If you think we can help, if you're a client, obviously you know to contact us at any point in time. Maria handles our calendar. Get on our calendar. We're here for you. If you're not a client but you have questions, you see our contact information, set up a discovery call, and we'll help you in any way that we can, okay? Why don't we go through Rosario? I'm guessing we've got some additional questions.
So everyone, thanks for your questions. There's no way we can get through all these, so we're just gonna pick a few, throw them out there. For the ones that we don't get through, you can email us, you can put us on calls, and we'll try to get to everyone over the next 2 or 3 days. So I'll just throw some out there. Tim says, and I'll pick up the first couple, and then Dave, I'll give you a couple. Is
Sure.
2020 tax credit subject to an earnings limit? We have no idea. Right now, we think they're going to keep the same 75 to 98 and up to 150 to 198. So if you're going to be underneath that in 2020, we assume you're going to get a credit on your 2020 tax return. That's how we're reading through this right now. Obviously, we've got a whole year to clarify what this act does and what people can do. I think the answer is yes, those limits that were applied for 18-19 will be the same limits that you're going to see in 2020. Susie says, would college age dependents get a rebate? Now that's the underscore line. Any dependent will not get a rebate. If they're a dependent on your tax return, you're going to get $500 for that dependent. If not, they're not going to get their $1,200 rebate or the $24 if there's a couple involved. But in this case, if they're a dependent on your tax return, you're going to get a $500 credit. Dave, Sandy says, steps for applying to unemployment as a gig economy worker.
Sure, thanks, Sandy. So your first step, typically as a gig economy worker, you're probably not going to qualify for state. However, again, the federal benefits and the state benefits are all going to be administered by the state unemployment systems. They've got the infrastructure already in place. And so even though you might not qualify on the state level, you have to apply to the state as a prerequisite to getting federal benefits. So I would encourage you as soon as you can, today, tomorrow, go to your state. If you're in New Jersey, go to the state site. If you're in a different state, go to the state unemployment site, apply. Even if they deny you, that's the prerequisite that you do need to then apply for the federal benefits.
Dave, Janet says, if you were approved for state unemployment, can you collect federal too?
Yes, you can. That's absolutely correct. You can collect both. And so if you get, for example, and just using the numbers, if you get the maximum state, which I know is $713 per week, you are still able to get the additional $600 per week that the Fed is offering. So you can get both. That's correct. You're absolutely right.
I'll answer this one. Valerie says, does 100K IRA withdrawal include if I roll it to a Roth IRA? This is pretty tricky, but I think the answer is yes. So ultimately what we're saying is take the 100 grand out of your IRA, move it to your Roth. You have 3 years to get it back in the IRA. If you don't, you could pay the taxes, not just in 2020, but in 2021, 2022, possibly 2023, because it's 3 years from when you took the dollars out. So ultimately, yes, it's a pretty interesting thing. If I can now roll it into my Roth and pay lower taxes than if I did it all at once. Remember, if I did it in 2020, rolled into a Roth, that whole 100,000 goes into your tax return in 2020. If you can now piece it out for the next 2-3 years and go into a lower tax bracket, yeah, a Roth, moving it out of your IRA to a Roth, I think will qualify. I think it's a very good planning tool on what I'm reading. Tony says, for 100,000 distribution, does it include salary savings or defined benefit plans? Dave, what do you think?
I'm sorry, say again, please, Rosario.
For the 100,000 distribution out of an IRA, does it include salary savings, which I assume would be 401k? The answer would be yes. How about defined benefit? I would think no.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything specifically on that. That'll be something we'd have to look up. Candidly, I wouldn't have an answer on that tonight. I don't know.
You wouldn't be able to take the dollars out of your defined benefit because it is a defined benefit when you leave work. So you really don't know what that's really worth to you now. Not even sure if companies have funded to give it to you now. It's a good question. We don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah.
My feeling and inkling is not defined benefits. Defined contributions, yes, but not defined benefits. Let's move over. Sandy says, and Dave, you want to take this one, 100,000 distributions applies to SEP and self-employed people. This is on the IRA or the SEP plans.
Yeah, I would think it would. I didn't see specific language on the SEP, but I would imagine so, yes. I would think that would, yes.
I would agree 100%. If you have a SEP out there, it works almost like an IRA, and you can definitely, in my opinion, do that. I'll take one more. So Ryan, can you apply for PPP without a business checking account? You want me to take that one? Because I've gone through that one.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Bank of America, if you go to their site, says we're not going to give you the PPP loan unless you have a business checking account with us. So what that means to me, and then I looked at the PNC website and another bank website, and they didn't have that. They just wanted you to have an account with them. So it could have been a checking account. So ultimately, I want to say that banks are creating their own rules here. What they want you to do to access their money. You guys all have to understand that the banks are getting that 1% interest, 2-year loan on the PPP. This is not great for them. Originally, the government wanted to give you a 10-year loan. Wouldn't that have been pretty sweet at 1%? And it was a 0.5%, not 1%. So 0.5% for 10 years, boy, sign me up for that. But what's come out of this is the banks have come back and said, we're not doing 1%. We want to do not a 0.5%. We want to do 1%. And no one wants to be at 0.5% or 1% for 10 years. They want to do it at 2 years. So there's some negotiating going on. But these companies, these banks are getting paid from the U.S. government to give you these loans. Depending how many loans, they either get 1%, 2.5%, 4%. So, ultimately, they're making money somewhere else. It's being paid by the government. If you look at this, these loans are guaranteed through the SBA, and there's no cost to apply for these loans. Who do you think is picking up the cost? The U.S. government. Who do you think the U.S. government is? The taxpayers. So the banks are making money. I don't want to cry for them. But, at the end of the day, I think they're all going to have their little nuances on how they're going to give you that loan. But that's a good question. Sorry to say, I know I have a bunch of other questions, but I think our time is running short. We want to thank everybody that got on here. Hopefully you got some good information. Marissa will send this out, today's discussion out to you so you can review it again. She'll also put in all those resources or all those where to go get information from. I think it's something that's the best thing out of this webinar tonight is to be able to go into these different websites and get some other things done that people usually don't talk about. So we'll send that along. You'll also have an opportunity, if you're a client, you want to talk to us, just hit our calendar link and put some time in there, and then we'll come talk to you. For people who are not clients, if you want to talk to us, have a discovery call, you can do the same. With that said, this is over for tonight. Dave, thanks for jumping in and helping.
Yeah, thanks for attending, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for attending, and everybody be safe. This will be over sooner or later, hopefully sooner than later, but we'll talk to everyone soon. Take care.
Thank you.